Hello, friends. Welcome to the Magdalene interview series. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt your heart break open in a real way, maybe in the best way? What was that like for you? This is what we're going to be talking to our dear friend about today. And before we dive into all of that, this was very special. So she has just come back from the south of France, has these wonderful experiences to share with us. We are having this conversation on Good Friday. It just feels like a lot of swirling, beautiful synchronicities. And so I'm so honored to have you here with us today. And I just want to name as well, I'm doing this in partnership with the fact that I am leading a retreat, Magdalene Black Madonna pilgrimage to the south of France in September. That will be 8 days visiting the different sites where Mary Magdalene visited, which she visited those sites because they were already considered ancient sites through pagan culture and through ancient goddess worship sites and things. And so this is where we're going, and we'd love to have you come and join us. If you're watching or listening and you're interested, please shoot me a DM and we can talk some more about it. The link is also above in the comments. Without further ado, my dear, will you please introduce yourself for us today?
Yeah. Thank you for having me here. My name is Paola Chapa Cerviatti. I was born in Mexico, in Estado de Mexico, which is like the state surrounding Mexico City. And I lived there until I was 10, which is when I moved to Massachusetts. So I went from this culture that really celebrated almost this syncretism between Catholicism, Christianity, but also the indigenous roots of like Dia de los Muertos and all of these deities. Like there's this concept called Ometeotl, which means like the god of like Omega, all that is infinite, and then Teotl, which means God. And so it's really this concept of like God is in everything. And so I went from this culture that was very rich and vibrant and colorful to Boston, Massachusetts, which is very like rigid and scientific and academic and almost cold and sterile in comparison. Um, and that's where I was educated. I ended up getting a degree. I got a master's in social work. I trained in Harvard. I worked at Massachusetts General Hospital. And I was really deeply embedded into research and clinical therapy and the Western medical system until at some point I realized that I was almost like profiting from people's misery. I was part of the system that was really profiting from people's misery. And that point, this happened during COVID too, so I was pretty burnt out from it all and very synchronistically, I ended up being able to take a leave of absence. I went on a pilgrimage through Spain. I don't know if you know the Camino de Santiago, but I did that whole pilgrimage. And from there, I just started realizing, like, initially it was just going to be a sabbatical. But the more I went on this pilgrimage and then I went back to Mexico, and the more I explored all of these different cultures and traditions, the more I realized that there was something deeply lacking in the Western medical system that I wanted to explore and then hopefully bring back and tie into my practice. So that's kind of what I've been exploring for the past 5 years now.
Holy moly. I'm like in awe of who you are. I mean, you moved from Mexico, and I'm wondering, and then you ended up in Harvard. I'm like, wow, like I think that's quite a feat. I could imagine. Do you have other family members that went to Harvard?
I didn't go to Harvard. I trained there. Like I did both of my field practicums there. I went to Boston University.
Okay, okay. Does your family, do they all have bachelors and PhDs and stuff?
Yeah, they are pretty highly educated. I did have a cousin who went to MIT, He got like a fellowship from Mexico. But yeah, all of my cousins have at least a master's degree. I have an aunt who just got her PhD at like 50. So I think she's an aspiration for me. I hope to eventually get a PhD in sociology myself.
So cool. Yeah. And to become a psychotherapist and then to still come into a place where you're like, I'm questioning the systems. I'm questioning like am I doing the good that I came here to do? I just think that's so beautiful. Um yeah. Are you when you so are you still a practicing psychotherapist right now?
I am, yes.
And in your sessions, you're interweaving some elements of different traditions, it sounds like, yeah?
Yeah, I do a lot of hypnotherapy, even if it is just kind of like a regression to a younger self, right? To heal a specific trauma. I pick up on a lot of patterns, and so it's a lot of repatterning. And that's kind of like with most of my clients. And then I have a private practice where I'm able to go more in depth, and I do basically quantum healing hypnotherapy. I'll do family constellations, where I bring in a whole family together to kind of discuss things from this lens of like Gestalt therapy, where you're using inanimate objects to talk about your feelings. So it kind of externalizes them, where it's not kind of going to step on anybody's toes, and you're able to um, reorganize the family unit in a way that feels more organic and that feels like it's going to flow more seamlessly moving forward.
Cool. And then you mentioned that you have also done some studies in some additional like spiritual traditions and things. You already talked about the Mexican like lineage with spirituality, but you mentioned you've done some things with Celtic um, studies and things as well. So, like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so I trained in Celtic shamanism and also as an Akashic Records reader.
Wow, you're so cool. I'm like amazed. Ah, that's really awesome. Okay, so that's a lot of different. I'm curious, what drew you to the Celtic shamanism?
So interestingly, the more I learned about the Celtic tribes, they weren't just in like the British Isles, right? They were also basically like the Celtic Empire extended all the way through Bulgaria at one point, and I'm part Italian, so and also Spanish. And so the Celts were in some of my countries of origin, right? Like they were in Spain, they were in Italy. And the more I've been traveling, the more I've kind of been learning about all of these different Celtic tribes, which is essentially kind of like in the United States, we call them Native Americans, right? And it was all of the indigenous people of the United States, but they each were different. And in that same way, like the Celtic tribes of Europe were essentially like all the native tribes that had all of these different practices where they communicated with the land, where they followed ley lines, they had pilgrimages, they followed the seasons. So it's been a really interesting thing to learn about.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that about the Celtic. I did not know a lot of what you just said. I didn't realize that Celtic uh, kind of is being used as this catch-all, and that they were really carrying just indigenous culture, indigenous traditions, and I didn't realize they extended so vast as well. That's really cool. Okay, so we have a little bit of a picture of who Paula, did I say it right? Paula?
Yes.
Okay, of who you are. Now let's talk about Mary Magdalene. You shared this beautiful, initial like cracking open of your heart through Mary Magdalene with a painting, was it in Scotland?
A
Can you
stained glass window, yeah.
can you take us back and walk us through that experience?
Yeah, it was really unexpected. Like, that day I woke up feeling really energized and excited. But then all as we were making, I was part of a group tour, and as we were making our way to this chapel, it was almost like my subconscious was already preparing me for it because I got so tired all of a sudden, and I just was so sleepy and I couldn't move. I slept the whole way to the chapel, and when we get there, I'm still kind of like in this like half awake, half asleep state. And the way that the tour guide described this chapel is like, oh, it's nothing really special. We'll just like stop there for 15 minutes. There's nothing really special about it. It has a stained glass window of Mary Magdalene with Jesus, but really, there's nothing really there. But for me, it was so significant. Like as soon as I stepped foot in that chapel and I saw this stained glass window, it's this picture of Jesus with his wraps around Mary Magdalene. She's pregnant and he has his arms around her belly, and her waters have just broken. And underneath the stained glass window, it has that quote from the Bible where it says, "What good Mary hath chosen shall not be taken. What good part Mary hath chosen shall not be taken from her." And as soon as I saw this, like so many things happened simultaneously in my brain. It all happened immediate, like instantly, where I started crying. It was like my own waters broke and I was just crying. And it was this sudden realization where my whole life I had been closed off to love. My father got a brain tumor when I was 3 years old, and he was my primary attachment figure. And so for me, it felt almost like if I had lost him so young, I didn't really understand what was happening, with all the changes. And it just didn't feel safe to love. And then we moved around a lot. And so it also felt like, why make new connections if we're just going to move again? And I would like lose those friendships. So it was kind of realizing that I hadn't been opening myself up to love my whole life. But it was also like in seeing that phrase, it was almost like God was creating this new covenant with me where from now on it would be safe to love. And there was deep, deep joy in that, but also anger at God for having made me suffer my whole life up until this point, and anger at myself for having closed myself up to God. And the tears, so a lot of grief too that was being expressed. So it was like all of these like emotions, everything was happening simultaneously, and it felt like everything mattered, but nothing mattered, or like whatever matter again in the same way. And I don't know. Again, we were probably in there for 15 minutes, and the whole 15 minutes I was just crying and just really processing everything that had just happened. And even after we left that chapel for the next month or two, I was constantly crying. I ended up going to Glastonbury, which is the heart chakra of the world. And it wasn't until I got there that I finally had this nice beautiful cocoon of love where I was able to stop crying enough to kind of like gather myself together again and be able to move about the world.
Wow. Hmm. So it goes back for those of us, you who are watching with us, and whether you watch live or watch on the replay, it goes back to that initial question. Like hearing your story touches into certain parts of my heart and my story too. And I'd love to hear from you in the community watching. Do you relate with those moments? And I think it takes a certain kind of bravery. Like we aren't ever dropped into those experiences unless our heart's been prepared. And it took a lot of bravery for you to just feel it for a couple of months, like to just hold it and be with
Mm.
it. And um, even though that sounds awful and miserable, it also is like it's the it's like the water before the blossom of the flower, isn't it? So you, how long ago was it that you were in Scotland?
This was in September.
Oh, okay. Okay. And you said some things came full circle for you when like literally a week and a half ago you were in the cave of Mary Magdalene in the south of France. Do you want to walk us through any part of between, that moment and this moment, or just share with us whatever else you feel inspired to share with us about this journey that you've been on with the Magdalene and with Christ?
Yeah, so I guess flashback a little bit before my pilgrimage started, I was still in Mexico and I walked into a crystal shop where I just felt like I needed to go in and I was buying a few different crystals, nothing special. And then I looked down as I was checking out and I saw this beautiful Mexican fire opal, which is petrified water. And for me, it's like water holds consciousness, right? It holds life. And if this um, crystal was petrified water, it means it's water. It's an organic intelligence that has been alive so long that it has become crystallized and petrified. And when I picked it up, I asked how much it was, and it was like $30. And it was the size of my thumb. So I was like, I'm not paying $30 for it. I put it down. But as soon as I put it down, I started crying. And so something moved in me where I was like, oh no, I must have this. So I ended up buying it. And then I have a friend who's a jeweler. She made it into a ring for me. And I call it my grief ring because it really helped me to begin that process of opening myself up to grief. And this is a ring that I carried with me to Scotland. And even when I was crying, like I would wipe my tears, and they would kind of catch on that ring. And then over the summer, I went right before Scotland, I went to the south of France. I was in Perpignan for a month and I went up to a sacred mountain there, Go de Canigo. It is sacred to the people in that region. And there's a dolmen up there. So when I was up there, I was journeying and I received this message where I was meant to give this ring to a man. And at that point, I assumed that I would be meeting a man who would kind of like share my grief with me and that would be strong enough to hold my grief for me. And
And
so it
since
was,
especially because you have had this, like, it's all correlated to opening yourself to love. So it makes so much
yes.
sense that you were like, oh, okay, like it's going to be a lover or something like that. That makes so much sense to me. I also think it's interesting, and I just want to pause for a minute and kind of bring this context that so I'm an intimacy coach. I don't know if you knew that or not. I also run a publishing company, but I'm also an intimacy coach. And whenever I'm helping people like crack open their heart to deeper levels of intimacy, it often comes with grief and anger and like things that we like. It's like, wait, I'm opening to love and suddenly I have to experience all these things. But if it's like if we don't carve space for those parts, we can't receive the love or the joy or all of the connection that we want to experience. So I just wanted to kind
Mhm.
of name some of that for those who are watching and thinking, wait, where's all the grief coming from? Like it sometimes can be a deep part of the process. We can't experience passion and eroticism without experiencing anger. We can't really know the depth of connection and love without experiencing grief. So, okay. All right. So you've got the ring, you've got this message, and it's like this is the grief ring, and you're cracking your heart open and you have this experience in Scotland and you got the grief ring. Okay, take us from there.
Yeah. So now this takes us back to where I'm going to this cave. And yeah, everything just kind of opened up and aligned where I had these 2 weeks open up for me. And I was like, I know exactly where I need to go. I need to go to this Magdalene cave that I've been like when I left Mexico back in May of last year. That was kind of my destination. And for whatever reason, well, obviously now it all makes sense that I had to visit all of these different places before ending up there. Um, but yeah, it's taken almost a year for me to get to this cave. So I ended up flying into Marseille and then walking through kind of some of the path that Mary Magdalene took to get to this grotto where she's said to have meditated for the last 33 years of her life. And I ended up staying at there's a hostelry there. It's run by Dominican monks. And the next day I go up and I'm climbing up the mountain, and all of this grief is, and it's really interesting because again, I was in this like half awake, half asleep state. I had been really sleep deprived. So I don't know if that's kind of something that helps me open up. But for the past 2 nights, I
Mm.
hadn't been sleeping. And so I was again in this state of grieving and crying as I'm walking up the mountain, and just kind of, it was almost like my own stations of the cross, where I was going up the mountain and just kind of like pausing at different spots and reflecting on all of these situations that have had brought grief into my life. And I get into the main basilica, which is where like the official Catholic cave where Mary Magdalene was said to have meditated. And as I'm sitting there, there's a mass. And when I close my eyes, I see Mother Mary, and she's kind of like bringing me into her bosom and just kind of offering me that maternal motherly love. And it just felt like a really beautiful experience. And prepared me to then go into the egg cave, which is the unofficial, but I feel like the much more significant cave, where it's a lot more plausible that Mary Magdalene would have actually used, because even before she used it, it was an ancient fertility site for the Celtic people of that region. It's shaped like a womb. And then as you go in, there's like literal stalagmites that have formed in the shape of eggs. So it just, yeah, definitely a fertility site. um, and as I'm sitting in this cave, I'm expecting to experience some sort of Magdalene encounter. And I'm just kind of sitting there. I was in there for about an hour. The whole time I'm in there, I'm just kind of, the only thing I'm feeling is almost like this melting away, almost like a lot of neural pathways being rewired. My brain just felt like it was melting, melting, melting. And then as I'm getting ready to leave, I just get this instinct that I'm supposed to leave my ring here. And I'm like, but wait, there's no man here. And I'm about to leave my ring, but then I take it and put it back on. I'm like, I'm not sure. And then I got this instinct to kind of film myself as I'm leaving the cave. And you know how, like, sometimes when you're filming, these like blue lights come out, kind of like these light disturbances. But this light specifically looked like Jesus. It looked like a resurrected Jesus, because he was not on the cross and he had like a flame above his head. So it's like the Pentecostal flame of the Holy Spirit having entered him. And in that moment, I was like, Jesus? Of course, Jesus is a man that I'm supposed to give my grief to. Why would I want to give my grief to any mortal man? Why would I want to spread my misery and my grief on humanity when I can give it to Jesus? Like, that's why he came to this world, was to take all of our sorrows, to take all of our misery, to help us to ascend, right? And so in that moment, it just, again, another moment of clarity and another burst of tears. And I was just kind of like sobbing again. And at that point, then I felt fully ready to leave my ring. And I was like, yes, Jesus, I will leave this ring here for you. And as soon as I walked out of that cave, I just felt so much freer and lighter. And then I ended up going up to, I forget what it's called, but when you go up to the summit of the mountain, it said that like Mary Magdalene was ascended there 7 times a day by angels. And when I get up there, I just kind of sit in the sun and I'm resting. And I was there for another hour probably. And I had my eyes closed. And all of a sudden, I see Mary Magdalene. And she always appears to me with an entourage. Like, she's always followed by disciples, which makes sense, right? Like, she's the apostle to the apostles. And so she was there with. She was there with a few other people, and she was older. She had like long flowing white hair, and she was kind of sitting in front of me but sitting in meditation with me. And she kind of turns and looks back at me, and she just had this look of approval, and that just kind of like sealed everything together.
Wow. Thank you so much for being willing to come on and share all of this with us. Oh, plus you're like very good at your storytelling, which is so beautiful. Like I was like with you the whole time. I'm like, it's so amazing. What do you feel? I want to ask you this, but first I want to point out something that was like coming through a lot as I was listening to you, which is like You are such a bridge person, from my perspective. And I wonder if you've felt into that yourself before, but to have, um, carrying multiple spiritual traditions, having, like very strong connection and roots. When you talk about how you are in relation with the lineages you carry, it's very obvious that you are in right relation, in a respectful, reverent, like real relationship with those. But it's from multiple continents. And so there's that piece I'm seeing. The other piece I'm seeing is certainly like Western medicine and Eastern or ancient medicine, and that you have your feet in both of those worlds. And the other two worlds I'm hearing is like the your version of how you relate with Christ, and the fact that you also still have roots and love and connection with Celtic and ancient practices that some, Christian traditions see as like incompatible, and
Mm,
you seem to hold them both in this beautiful way. And I'm just very inspired. I think it's so beautiful. What do you say about, have you recognized how much of a bridge, walker and creator that you are?
yeah. Yeah, and I think that is essentially my role, is to kind of like bring this evidence-based credibility to this ancestral wisdom. Like one small example is how the Toltecs had this kind of yoga where one of the poses that they would do is boat pose, but they would be kind of like looking from one side to the other and kind of reflecting on their day. And this to me is EMDR, right? It's bilateral stimulation while you're processing events of your day. And the ancient Toltecs knew this, and they knew to do this every day. So there was probably a lot less trauma back then because they were actively engaging in this practice. So yeah, it's just kind of like learning about these very science-backed traditions that our ancestors already knew. And yeah.
So cool. I just love that. And I do feel like it seems, one I think that we've created more than ever on the planet, well, at least as far back as I know what culture ever was like, an opportunity to get to hold more than one culture, hold more than one world, hold more than one philosophy, hold conflicting philosophies, and not have to have them be conflicting. Like that we have more space for that, and travel is more available, and these kinds of things are more available. But I also feel like it's almost like the souls who are coming to earth right now are also, um expanding or more capable as well of like of
Mm.
cultivating and holding these paradoxes, because I think that, like, as much as we're different, we're so similar, and our hearts are so beautiful. Sometimes they get all muddied up with trauma and shit, but like we're really one when it comes down to it. And so, like, what is going to bring peace to our planet? I think it's, yeah, all of the types of steps that you're taking. Like, imagine if everyone was following their internal nudges and creating rituals around
Mm.
holding their grief. And you know what I mean? Like, that's what we need. So I just want to reflect that and say thank you for the person that you are, and the way that you continue to say yes to the callings that come through your own heart. It's beautiful. Um,
Yeah.
as we begin to, bring our conversation to a close, even though I feel like we could talk forever, I want to like ask all the details about all the things that you've shared so far. Um, I am curious how these, I mean, this last thing was so recent for you, but how do you feel like your relationship with Mary Magdalene in particular has altered who you be in the world? Or what does it matter in a tangible way, if you could put it into a tangible, um what does that matter for you?
I'm someone who, as a child, didn't necessarily feel the need to communicate with words. a lot of the time I felt like I assumed that people would just understand me based on my facial expressions and like my eyes. And I think that a lot of times I do like hold eye contact very intensely and it made people uncomfortable. So then I stopped doing it for a long time. But I really do feel like that was actually one of Mary Magdalene's gifts was kind of healing through presence alone and healing through eye contact and becoming a mirror and reflection of others. And so it's just kind of helped me to remember this as a quality that I have within myself and feel proud and happy about that.
That's really cool. It feels like the way that she was so present with you has been a huge part of what has allowed you to like melt some of these walls and things, like that present, steady gaze. I really love that. Well, thank you so much for being willing to share in your journey and like so soon after just coming back. I think that she had booked this interview before she went and said like, this will be perfect. I'll be just getting back from France. And so I feel very honored to have gotten to feature your story and just get to witness the person that you're being in the world and the light that you're spreading. So, thank you again. Are there any final things that you would like to share with us today before we go?
Yeah, I think just definitely following those nudges, right? Even if when they feel uncomfortable, like whenever I left my hospital job and my cushy Boston life, I felt like that was what I was supposed to be doing for the rest of my life. And now I'm traveling all over the world and getting to meet all of these really rich, interesting cultures and following my passion of studying history and melding it with spirituality and religion and all of these different traditions. And so, really, once you open yourself up to those nudges, then you will actually feel a lot more happy and fulfilled.
So true. I agree so much. Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you to those of you who have watched and who have tuned in with us for this Magdalene interview series. And I hope everyone has a blessed weekend. And we'll see you next time on the Magdalene interview series.
Thank you.